got enough battery, so I
Yeah,
think
yeah, I'm not really concerned about that.
that's working now.
So now we're attached.
Yeah.
Are the bars moving up and down as I talk?
Can you keep talking? Do you mind keep talking for me?
Oh,
Sorry.
I'm up here.
Thank you. Yeah, go for it.
Just going to continue to talk. Hopefully we made that to Newtown Fair in the weekend. Lovely day.
Thank you.
Can you do me a favour and grab whatever else is down there, please?
Can't really see it. Is that going to be that thick?
Yeah, it will be, but as long as you're real pain. Is there another black one down there, that image?
Yeah, there is. Sorry.
Changing glass.
To make it flat. Oh, yeah.
See what I mean? Yeah.
Sorry, it just looks. Do you have your phone on you? Is that Oh, nothing actually. Sorry, I have the white phone, don't I? Here it is. Nothing. I will call them. A Q phone just to make sure it's all good.
Yeah, I can call them though if you want.
Phone.
Okay. We can't get through it, no.
Thank you. I don't even know who to call. Who do I call?
Just call Alex.
Sing on.
Do you go? Good work.
I'm just going to see the
Yeah, I reckon so. Because then you can understand the story because they expect it, you know,
Oh my god, there's no contact saved.
Just fiddling.
Oh, it's much better. We're doing the old road on my
Suddenly it smells again. Oh, okay, I'll try it again. There should be attachment. Is it? Okay, well, all right, I'll do it again. Hang on. Oh God, it's my live view phone now. May, can I borrow your phone? Yeah, hang on, I'll do it again. I'll go. Yeah, stop talking. Oh. Smells it. So I've just resent it, but can you, I don't know who to call because there's no contacts in this phone that I'm using right this minute, but who can tell me that they've actually got this live view and it's working properly?
Yeah, that's almost the best part of the entire.
What if you didn't agree during the leadership race? You've got some radical comments that you said
Yes, yeah.
Okay, brilliant. And I look like I've just missed a call from Pip Keen. Can you just tell her that I'm tied up with the live view? Do you mind just letting her know? Thank you. Okay.
Do something about X.
No idea. Probably not, because I'm just sitting in here trying to get the live view thing so I can hit it through. Jane Smart is going to go live as I get 4 o'clock. So she must be going live into the news or something? I'm not sure.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, alright, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, bye. Mine.
back in the days we used to stream it out live.
Yeah, yeah.
I know. Oh, okay. That was that
Oh,
one.
yeah.
I'll just flash it.
Sitting the agenda. Oh, there you go. Oh, you know.
Here comes the pen.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is a government that believes it has a responsibility to face the bigger, longer-term issues for New Zealand. Already this year, we've made significant announcements, for instance, investing in better policing, improving fresh water quality, rolling out ultra-fast broadband to another 150 towns, and tightening up on the tax obligations of multinational corporations. Today I want to talk about another one of those substantive issues, New Zealand superannuation. Improvements in healthcare and lifestyle mean that we are living longer today than we ever have. New Zealanders' life expectancy has increased by 12 years in the last 60 years, including a 4-year increase since 2001, when the retirement age became 65. This means that someone qualifying for New Zealand Super today is expected to live another 21 years. By 2037, that number is forecast to rise to more than 23 years. Older New Zealanders are also working more. Good health is good news. It means we can enjoy life more and remain active in the workforce and the community for longer. However, longer life does drive up the cost of New Zealand Super. By international standards, New Zealand Super remains relatively affordable. Funding superannuation presently costs about 5% of GDP. This compares with an average of 9% across OECD countries. However, the cost in New Zealand is expected to rise to 8.4% of GDP by 2060, a significant increase on today's cost. That level of spending on superannuation is affordable if we constrain spending on other areas. But we don't want to have to cut spending on healthcare and education or to put up taxes. For these reasons, Cabinet today decided to progressively increase the age of eligibility for New Zealand Super to 67, starting in 20 years' time. The Retirement Commissioner recently recommended increasing the age from 2027. However, we believe that a longer adjustment period is fairer because it gives affected families and individuals more time to plan for their futures. The change will bring New Zealand into line with other countries like Australia, the United Kingdom, Denmark, Germany and United States, which are all moving to the age of 67. The change will initially save about $4 billion a year. Cabinet also decided to change the residency requirement for eligibility for New Zealand Super from 10 years to 20 years. The change will apply to people arriving in New Zealand after the legislation is passed. Other aspects of New Zealand Super, such as indexing payments to the average wage and universal entitlement without means testing, will remain unchanged. The changes we've announced, which we will legislate for next year, will more fairly spread the costs and benefits of New Zealand Super between generations, ensure the scheme remains affordable into the future, and give people time to adjust. As some will point out, the government's previous position adopted before the 2008 election was not to change the age of eligibility. That position was appropriate at the time when there had been so much uncertainty over eligibility for New Zealand Super. New Zealanders then were looking for certainty after years of contention. Now that the economy is growing well and the government's books are in surplus, it's time to ensure that we have the right settings for the future. Making sensible decisions today avoids harder decisions tomorrow. I'll now hand over to Minister Joyce to take you through some of the details of the change.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Progressively lifting the age of entitlement to New Zealand Super from 65 to 67, starting in 20 years' time, is, we believe, the responsible and fair thing to do for New Zealand. This is about improving the long-term sustainability of New Zealand's superannuation, promoting fairness between individuals and generations, and giving people time to plan for their future. There are several consequential changes that flow from this decision. At the same time as we begin increasing the age of eligibility for New Zealand Super in 2037, we would also be increasing the age of eligibility for the Veterans Pension and the Super Gold Card. However, in line with the recommendation from the Retirement Commissioner, the age at which people can access their KiwiSaver funds will remain 65. As the Prime Minister mentioned, we have also decided to increase the residency requirement for New Zealand superannuation. Presently, people aged 65 and over are able to claim New Zealand Super once they have been residents for 10 years. This does create an issue of fairness. People who have not made as long a contribution to New Zealand during their working lives are, after living here for only 10 years, receiving the same support as people who have paid taxes in New Zealand for their entire working life. The Retirement Commissioner has recommended increasing this residency requirement to 25 years. Our Cabinet has discussed that and settled on 20 years as a fair and appropriate requirement. There is one other thing I would like to flag. In 2030, 7 years before the change begins to take effect, it's the change of age, we're going to legislate for the Government of the day to review the impact of the proposed changes on different groups and consider whether any temporary additional support would be needed for people who are not able to continue working beyond the age of 65. As the Prime Minister has said, New Zealand superannuation will remain indexed to the average wage and it will remain universal without means testing. We believe that these important features of the New Zealand superannuation scheme should be retained. Back to you, Prime Minister.
Any questions?
When did you have the change of heart on this issue? For a long time
Oh, look, when I became the Prime Minister, I signalled then that there was the opportunity for us to review policies. I always supported the position taken by the previous Prime Minister, because I think at the time, in 2008, almost 10 years ago now, there was a real need for certainty that an incoming national government would not be changing the settings. And as it turned out with the global financial crisis, I think it was really important that older people had a sense of security, even when we had very large deficits, that national super wouldn't change. So when I became Prime Minister, I said that I wouldn't be making the same commitment as the previous Prime Minister had, and we've been doing work since then about what the policy position would be, including a discussion with the National Caucus early in February.
So would this have happened, would this change have happened if John Key was still Prime Minister?
Well, you'd need to ask him, but I doubt it, given the undertaking that he'd made.
What happened this morning and over the last couple of days? Have you been panicked into putting this announcement out today? Was it not your intention to do it today?
No, it was always our intention to do it today.
So why didn't you say that this morning?
Oh, well, because I didn't want to announce it ahead of announcing it.
You said last year that you had envisaged
Sorry?
weakening the entitlement.
Yes, we had a discussion over a month ago at the one-day caucus in early February. Well, we had a wide-ranging policy discussion about the potential for change. They were advised of the Cabinet decision today a couple of hours ago.
You said when you became Prime Minister that you didn't envisage weakening superannuation entitlements. By raising the age of entitlement, don't you do just that?
No, I don't agree with that. The way it's calculated and the level of it is all remains unchanged. In fact, by making this announcement today, people who are at retirement or near retirement know that the current entitlements stay in place for 20 years. There would be no other change in the interim, and the move to 67, I think, is something that would be widely anticipated. Sorry? Yes, I think so. I think it's people can see there's a significant issue with the ageing population, and this is a fair and reasonable response to that. We're not ignoring it, but we're bringing in a pathway that is fair and reasonable, gives people considerable time to adjust their circumstances if that's what's needed.
Did you consider going further than 67? Because given the life expectancies you outlined at the start, another 2 years, shifting at 2 years is pretty piecemeal, isn't it?
Well, over the 20 years, it matches about the change in life expectancy over that time. So someone who turns 67 in 2040 will spend about the same time on national super as someone turning 65 today. So it's that sort of sense of fairness and reasonableness, I think, is something that the public will support.
You didn't consider going further?
No, we didn't look at older age thresholds.
Are you willing for this to be a point of negotiation in any post-election government formation talks?
Well, look, that's a matter for other parties. I mean, I think the position we've announced is a pretty fair and reasonable one. It deals with an issue that everyone knows is there and needs to be dealt with. We are doing so now because we think that a reasonable decision now avoids tougher decisions later, something pointed out by the Retirement Commissioner. So we'll see how the other parties consider their position. I think this is a position that will be supported by the public. And in fact, it may be that they may find themselves explaining why they think no change should happen at all in the face of very widely accepted analysis that the cost is going to go up considerably.
Have you discussed it tonight?
No, we haven't.
Prime Minister, would you be prepared to change it, though, to go back on it if, say, for instance, the New Zealand First Party demanded that it not be changed in order to get their support in post-election negotiations?
Well, look, I think you're going to hear a lot about bottom lines, any number of them, between now and the election, but that'll be basically, the nature of those negotiations is determined largely by the voters.
But this, I think, because it's such a fair and reasonable approach. It protects the retired, it protects those who are near retirement, and it deals with the issue of how long, how long people have paid taxes for in New Zealand before they're entitled. And when I've listened to the other parties, those are areas of concern for them. I think this announcement achieves a path to change in a way that should be broadly acceptable to the public, and I think, and perhaps to other parties once they've thought about it.
Does this mean so much to you in connection that you would be prepared to go into opposition if, for instance, the party said we will not support you in government unless you change your policy on raising the age? Would you be prepared to go into opposition rather than go back on this?
Well, as I've said, we're not conducting post-election negotiations when we don't know what the other parties' positions are, and we certainly don't know what the public's view is, because in the end the public will vote. I mean, we're doing this deliberately in a way that means it gets discussed through election year, and voters have the opportunity to take it into account. And as I've said, it's pretty fair and reasonable, and as the public look at it and other parties look at it, we'll see where they all get to.
But we do know New Zealand First position because Mr. Peters has spoken about it publicly, and his position is that he will not support a national government if it's intent on raising the age. So would you go back on it if you had to?
Well, we're not conducting the negotiations, but I think Mr. Peters took his position before he was aware of what the government policy is going to be, because we hadn't announced it till now. And as I said, the concerns I've seen raised by other parties are about security for people in retirement, certainty for people who are nearing retirement. This doesn't affect anyone aged 45 and over. And I think in the light of what I believe will be pretty broad public support, they get the chance to consider their positions. So I wouldn't take for granted what their positions are.
What do you think that this policy had on Labor's election, not successes in the last two elections?
Well, look, I mean, the Labor Party had all sorts of problems in the last two elections, most of which are still going to have in the next election, which aren't to do with super. Their proposition, as I understand it, was for a much quicker transition, and I think it's that lack of reasonableness may have affected how people saw the policy, but they had bigger problems than their superannuation policy.
Do you think that this will affect your own chances of getting a full?
No, I don't think so. I think it'll probably enhance them because people expect a government to deal with the long-term issues, and we now have the opportunity to do it. So we're doing it. I think the plan we've outlined is fair and reasonable, and it will have broad public support. I mean, people know it's going to change. They've known that for a while, and now there's a clear path for them to change. And I think the issue through election year is going to be other parties arguing why there should be no change ever, because that's really the position they would be taking. So I think we've yet to see just how their positions evolve over the next 6 months.
Why are you putting the legislation in 2018? Did you think about doing it this year?
We just didn't think it was going to work that well this year. Well, I think people just need to be able to absorb the proposition we're putting out there, work out whether they think it's a sound policy. And I think given the significance of New Zealand superannuation for every New Zealander, the opportunity for it to be tested by an election is one that we're happy to see put to the test.
You said this morning that people obviously were aware of the debate, and we've been having the debate for 20 years, so surely that counts against your comment just there that people need time to get used to it.
Well, they haven't had a specific proposition, and as you've seen just in the last 48 hours, as soon as the issue's raised, you do get people, suggesting all sorts of awful things are going to happen. So today we've announced the specific proposition, and I think a debate about that through election year is something we welcome.
What do you make of Winston Peters' assessment that it is affordable? I mean, his numbers, how would you characterise them?
Well, what's happened in the last 15 years or so is that the projections about the costs of national super have improved quite significantly, and that's related largely to the growth in the number of older people working and a strong economy. So because we have a strong economy and robust government finances, we don't need to make sharp changes in national super. And this is one of the benefits of the economic management you've seen under this government. We get to now make a considered change. Because the circumstances are more favourable than, say, 10 or 15 years ago, certainly 15 years ago, then the way we describe it is that it's affordable, but we want to reduce the pressure to trade off other spending. So when you get to 2040, there will be pressure on health spending, on education, on other entitlements, and the economy has to support all those, and younger taxpayers have to support all those different needs. And that's another reason this is fair and balanced, because it takes into account the longer term interests of younger taxpayers, today's 20-year-olds who have to meet all those requirements with a smaller workforce and a larger ageing population.
How much will it save? $4 billion a year?
Yeah, around 0.6% of GDP, which is actually quite considerable in around 2040. Well, there's been work done on that. Retirement Commissioner looked at options for 10 years, starting in 10 years' time. We just think that doesn't give enough time for people to adjust, and there isn't that much urgency about the government finances as there might have been, if you use the projections from 10 years ago.
The Māori Party would like the age of entitlement for Māori to be reduced to 63. Would you give any consideration to Māori because of their shorter life expectancy in Pakeha?
Well, this is another benefit of taking this 20 years lead up, is that it gives time to see whether a current trend is going to continue, and the current trend is that Māori life expectancy is closing the gap with Pakeha life expectancy, and I think we'd all hope that over the next 20 years that gap gets closed up. So by then it may not be an issue. But as Minister Joyce pointed out, we would include in the legislation a review in about 2030 around the impact on various groups. The one that most easily comes to mind are those who have worked in manual jobs all their life, and working past 65 is a bit of a stretch, pretty hard on them. So I think those things do need to be taken into account. But in 15 years' time, the picture will be a bit different than it is now. We're talking about, today's 50-year-olds and how they're handling it. So that's why we've put that review in at 2030. To signal clear intent, we don't quite know what the answers will be.
So there could be exemptions for Māori and Pacifica if that gap doesn't close?
Oh no, I don't think it would be. We wouldn't be intending exemptions based on ethnic background, because there'll be plenty of Māori and Pacifica who aren't working in long-term labouring jobs or really physically demanding jobs, whereas there will be right across your community people in that situation. We've yet to see with the evolution of technology and workplace safety and so on just how big an issue it is going to be in 20 years' time. That's why we're not prejudging it too much now.
You're ruling out exemptions based on race?
Yes, that's right.
Have you consulted with Grey Power and people like that about it?
Oh, we've let them know. They're like everyone else in the New Zealand public, understand that there's likely to be a need for change. They've yet to state publicly what they think of this change because it's only just been announced, but I did speak to their chair in the last few hours.
Prime Minister, isn't this a risky political move 6 months out from the election? And did you think about just waiting until after the election if you were to get elected again?
Look, I think it's just, well, of course you consider all these things, but look, this is just the right thing for New Zealand. The politics can get stuck in a cycle where before every election, every party has to promise that nothing will change, and then after the election they can't change anything because they promised beforehand that it wouldn't. So we've decided to take what we think is a good opportunity now. We're not under pressure. We can make a fair and balanced and long-term decision, which I believe the public will support.
Was the ball rolling on this before the 5th of December last year?
Sorry?
Was the ball rolling on this before the 5th of December last year?
No, not to my knowledge.
This isn't the reason John Hughes resigned?
No, not at all. Well, look, bear in mind, it doesn't become an issue for 20 years because the age doesn't start increasing for 20 years. So anyone 45 years and older today is unaffected. And if they've been working hard and they're getting a bit tired and they're 63, they'll still get super in 2 years' time. And if they're 53, they'll still get super in 12 years' time, just the way it is now. We've just signalled the review because it's not obvious what the answers are going to be then. I mean, you hear some claims that technology is going to take away all the labour-intensive jobs. Well, we don't know if that'll be the case in 15, 20 years or not.
In the event that you can form a government after the next election, would you expect Labor to, would you seek bipartisan support from Labor and would you expect them to support it?
Look, I expect that they'll be able to support, in the end, what is a fair and reasonable track to change. I think they will need to answer the question over the next week why they used to support it and now don't, why they now believe, if they do, that no change should occur at all. So I'd expect, given a bit of time and exposure to public opinion, they may come round to supporting it.
Would you prefer to do it with bipartisan support?
Well, you know, that'll depend on the outcome of the election and the breadth of public support for it. But I would hope that they consider the proposition because it's about as reasonable a path as you could get and about as fair as you could get as a path to making change that I think pretty much everybody believes is change that's coming.
Would the legislation be a confidence in supply?
Well, look, I wouldn't want to again prejudge that when we don't have an election result, and it's some time before we do. That's just another matter of negotiation.
But on that, I mean, do you rule out changing it? Do you rule out changing it if in a coalition negotiation? Do you actually rule that out?
Well, as I said, we're not going to debate and negotiate when we're still 6 months out from an election and busy being a government continuing to get to grips with longer term important issues for New Zealand.
So you don't rule out changing it if you have to get a government?
Well, I'm not going to rule in and I'm not going to rule out. We put out a proposition. This is our policy. It's up to the other parties to decide their positions. As I said, it's a very fair and reasonable approach. It gives people time, and they will need to deal with the issue or answer the question as to why they think nothing should ever change, particularly the Labor Party, given that they, for a couple of elections, supported change.
Looking at the politics of this, is there a chance here that you are, and I know you don't want to talk hypothetically, but looking at the public positions that we do know, is there a chance here that you are driving Winston Peters into the arms of the Labor Party who want to keep it at 65?
No, I don't think so. Elections are decided on a whole range of issues. Those parties will get the opportunity to consider their policy positions, and who knows how reasonable they may turn out to be. If they've got better suggestions about how to make this transition, then they're welcome to float those with the public. But I think taking the position, looking out over the next 20 years, 25 years, that nothing should change, I think is a position they're going to find quite hard with the public, because in our experience, public understand this sort of change was likely to come, and they're better to have a sense of security about knowing what's going to happen. I mean, if there was an alternative government after the election, there'd be much less certainty, because you've got people who are pretending nothing's changed.
Would you rather have done, given you just set it out and the public sees this coming and sees the logic of it, would you rather have done this a year or two earlier, 3 years earlier?
Oh no, well I think that would have cut across the undertakings that we made in the previous government, and I think the circumstances now are about right, where we've got more certainty about and more confidence about the growing economy and the state of the government's books, and we've got an election not too far away where a proposition like this can get tested.
Surely it creates more uncertainty by leaving the legislation until after the election. People now don't know what will happen
the other parties will stop legislation from happening. Surely if you put it through now, people know that's what has happened and is going to happen.
Well, look, I think that would then be seen as an internal party deal preempting the public's right to have a say about it. And given the importance of this issue over the last 30 years in New Zealand politics, the greatest certainty comes from the legitimacy of having it tested in an election and an incoming government being able to get the numbers together in a parliament that the voters have put there, knowing that this is one of the things that was going to be put in place.
And also, which cabinet colleagues needed bringing around on this morning?
I think the cabinet, well, as you know, the cabinet takes collective responsibility, but we've been through a very good internal process, starting with the caucus a month ago, and ongoing look at some variations on it, and cabinet decision to go ahead and announce the policy.
Is this a sign that you, as Prime Minister, are more prepared to spend political capital and that we might see more of these tackling some of these more difficult issues?
Look, I don't see it as spending political capital. I think there's a lot of political capital in getting to grips with longer term issues that people know are important, providing them with certainty about where government does influence the decisions that they make. And that's what this, and doing so in a fair and reasonable manner. I mean, the public are quite capable of understanding the pressures for change in this area and what's reasonable and what's unreasonable, just as they are with other, quite complex long-term issues. So no, I don't see it as using up political capital at all.
Mr Joyce, in your capacity as campaign chair, how are you going to sell this during the campaign?
Well, I think the Prime Minister's just done an exceptional job of talking about it. Look, we're just going to go through a range of things and promote a range of policies. I think what people already know, if you look at what the government has announced so far this year, is that we're very active, very focused on the policies for 2017 and beyond in New Zealand, and they'll get the opportunity to compare that with some of the other players. I have to say, as my fifth election as campaign chair, I'm more happy than ever that I'm the campaign chair for this side, and because we've got a government and a team which is very actively developing policy, thinking of solutions to long-term issues and dealing with them.
Can you think of a slogan that kind of encapsulates this?
Not today, Mr. Harmon.
These changes around migrants, when do they come in, and would you consider bringing them in earlier?
Well, they just come in when the legislation is passed, and there's reasonably generous grandfathering related to it. Yep.
You guys have both argued against this sort of proposal vehemently for the last 8 years, and you'll probably be cancer for Africa, what you're doing. Doesn't this make you guys hugely hypocritical?
No, what we argued for was the government's position as stated back in 2008, which was that there wouldn't be changes in national superannuation while John Key was Prime Minister. That's what we argued for and supported. And so today we've outlined the reasons why now is a good time to take this step, a fair and reasonable path of change, which I think most people will understand. So we want to be quite clear about that. We argued to support the position the government took at the time, and I've said many times right through that on the public record, that was fundamentally about establishing trust, which had seen a lot of pretty tough politics on superannuation for a couple of decades, and the National Party in opposition came to the view that it needed to establish that trust. That turned out to be give a real sense of security at a time when the government through 2009-10 was under real pressure with large earthquake, South Canterbury finance, and it enabled older people and people near retirement to feel secure because those undertakings were absolutely locked in.
So what you're saying is John Key was holding you back, or this policy?
No. What I'm saying is, the time comes when you get to where we believe it's right. A lot of people, some would have said you should not not deal with it in election year. I happen to believe that if we took that attitude, change would never happen until it was too late, and then you'd have harsh change in this respect. So we've had a change of leader, we've got an election close coming up, we've got the government, we've got economic confidence, the government's book's in good shape, and that's a good time to reset and take this longer term view. Well, I think the day I became the leader, I was asked if I'd make the same undertaking as the previous Prime Minister, and I said that I wouldn't.
So pretty much straight away to get officials?
Well, no, again, the work started before Christmas. Look, it's one of these issues where, we understand how it works, that you have to have a clear position. So we just happen to, and that's why it's important to have a short period where you have a look at it, get a clear position, so that people can have security if they're in national super, New Zealand super, and they can have some certainty about the path. And I think we've got through that process about as effectively as you can.
Have you got something against people who were born in the 1970s? They were the first lot to cop student loans with full interest, and now they're the first to cop the increase in super, the exact same year group?
No, we haven't. I mean, this is a generation who are going to these, under 45s, where with a strong economy, with sensible government that's been able to lower taxes, get more efficiency out of government spending, keep our focus on openness of trade with other countries, who are going to have a pretty good ride through the next 10 or 15 years.
Treasury over the last few years.
Sorry?
Treasury over the last few years have been proposing a save-as-you-go system for the super fund, as well as the age change along these lines. Are we going to see any changes to super fund contributions from this budget?
Well, there's a policy about renewing the super fund contributions when we get to debt down to 20% of GDP. Because remember, the contributions up until about now, or another year or two, would all have to be debt funded. And we made a decision early on. We did not want to debt fund, investment in equities across the world. So when we get to the 20%, we'll begin the contributions consistent with the formula that's in the legislation.
Prime Minister, did you consider any other changes? I'm thinking specifically of people that worked in New Zealand for 30 or 40 years and retire overseas for whatever reason. It doesn't seem fair that they aren't entitled to anything, and especially now that you're saying that people have to be in New Zealand for 20 years to be entitled. Is there any thought of reciprocating with those people?
Well, look, there's some reciprocal arrangements in place with, like, the UK, Canada, Australia. You'd have to look into the detail of that. I couldn't comment on it, but no, not as part of this package. I mean, we've decided to focus on a few significant changes. There's other issues that people can raise, but I think this is the policy bit that matters most.
How confident are you that there can be a political consensus across what seems to be 7 electoral cycles before this is implemented? It would seem unlikely, wouldn't it?
Well, you have to think of the extent to which parties could disagree with this. I mean, I think they'll find it hard to argue no change forever across, 15, 20 electoral cycles, and I can't imagine any of the current parties bringing it forward. I think we've struck about the right balance here in a way that could enable other parties to support it once they see where public opinion is and consider the policy, which has only just been announced. That's been part of our consideration.
History may correct me on this, but you're making a promise here that you're probably not going to be around to keep, aren't you?
Well, who knows, but it's unlikely.
How long is super going to be around? What do you think? Like a state pension? People in their 20s, 30s going to get it? Yes, I believe so.
I think particularly in recent years, as we've built confidence in our economy, as we've seen more older people working, the outlook looks more manageable. I think even 15 years ago, in the late 90s, early 2000s, when a lot of work was done on all this, the outlook was pretty alarming. It has improved significantly since, and I think the quality of the economy and economic management is a lot better, and that means we can sustain a reasonable level of a pension for people who need it.
It's like, why? I don't want to. It's like, so some people seem to love it, but yeah, I totally understand that, being driven mad by that type of thing.
It's an interesting piece of etiquette consideration in the modern world. Kevin, what do you think?
Well, it's a very weird thing, isn't it, to say, well, you don't have a view, you can't have a say because somebody sitting closer is not bothered by it. I mean, how do you know they're not deaf or just slightly weird? They love that sort of clicky noise. I don't think it's a legitimate argument at all, to be honest.
It's a bit like being a couple of cars behind someone who won't move when the light turns green, but the people right behind won't toot.
Yep.
Yes, that's an extremely... yes, that's a very, very good analogy.
So do you toot if you're 4 cars back?
No, I try not to toot at all at issues like that.
I did that once and caused a road rage incident, but the person, because I was 2 cars back, the person who got the road rage turned on the car behind them, thinking it was them, and it was the most bizarre thing. And they followed them up the road and at high speed. I had to kind of follow at a safe distance just to make sure that person didn't get killed, because I felt so guilty at that point.
Good Lord, that was drama.
Yeah,
I hope you felt guilty.
That's the North Shore for you.
The Canadian columnist, a couple more things, asks an important question. When is criticism reasonable and when is it not worth the fuss? And, I mean, these are hard decisions. Is it okay to shush someone in a movie theatre, even though, say, it's just the trailers playing, not the main feature?
No, you got to wait for the main feature. You can't do it during the trailers.
All right. Is it permissible to tell someone to stop talking loudly on their phone, say on a bus? Does that depend on the length of the commute?
Yeah, totally. And if you want to buy into being that person, I guess, is the thing that you find yourself, arguing about with yourself. But there is that classic comedic sketch that used to be on Trigger Happy TV, I think, and the guy was he had a giant phone and he'd be going, "I'm on the train! I'm on the train!" So,
which is exactly what people do when they wander around supermarkets talking to someone.
People don't realise there's actually a little thing inside the phone that amplifies your voice. And you could actually whisper.
Any closing thoughts, Kevin? Are you a very tolerant man?
No, and increasingly intolerant. But I went up to this very large, scary man on the beach who was walking his dog one day. But he didn't have the dog. It was a big, scary dog too. And I said to him, "Why don't you put your dog on a lead? Because if your dog ran up to a little kid like it ran up to me, the kid would be scared to hell." And anyway, he told me to go away in a rather sharper way than that. And I then found my letterbox full of dog shit.
Oh, really?
Only a couple of weeks later.